Okay, so now that we've got all the animation done, let's do the cameras. So first let's get our forest to display. Let's zoom out, see what we have. Let's click on any dynamics tag, click bake all cache. Well, first maybe you should have cleared it all and click bake. Let's clear all the cache and click bake. There we go, now it bakes correctly. And now when we drag through the timeline, we see the Catapult drive in, launch, the array elastic is working, and the castle explodes. Wonderful. Now we should do the actual camera animation. So let's pick a place we want our camera to start. I want my camera to be like around here when it starts. So when it drives in, yep, good. So from this point, let's make a camera. Now, when you make a camera, you're not actually looking through the camera, you can still zoom out and you'll see the camera where it is. So what we need is I always build my camera rigs for the scene that I'm working with. So in this case, I want my camera to just move across and I want it to rotate, so it starts, from this, looking this way, and I want it to end looking the opposite way, not the opposite, but like at a different angle to the castle. So I don't want it to keep looking like this, I want it to see the castle front on. And I want at some point, I want it to look up and look at the boulder flying through the sky. So we're going to need a move null, which will move the camera from left to right. We're going to need a rotate null, which will rotate its angle view from this direction into this direction. And we're going to want a pitch null, which will let us pitch the camera so that it looks up at the boulder. So let's make a new move null first. Let's go here, let's make a null. And let's move it on top of the camera. And let's make the null, let's go object, make it a pentagon, orientation XZ, make it bigger. There you go, it's going to be our move null. And let's go basic, color on, and make it kind of orange. So that's going to be our move null on the ground there, good. Now for the camera, we want the pitch and the rotate. We want the pitch to be inside the rotate because we want the rotate to work like we want it to rotate. We don't want, because let me demonstrate. Let's just make the two nulls so I can show you what I mean. We make the nulls pretty easily. We just press Alt-G twice and we unfold this and we call this the pitch null. And we call this the rotate null. And there's just one thing I want to do. I want to move the camera. Let's add the objects first. Make this a star, bigger, and let's align it to so it's horizontal with the camera. And the rotate null will be just a circle and make it flat, make it bigger there. About this big. Let's make the star a bit bigger. It seems a bit small there. Now, and I want to move the camera so that it's in the middle of the star. So let's take the camera out of this and get both these nulls. And let's just get the rotate null and let's move it back a bit. There you go. And now, let's call this the move null. And let's put this in there. And let's put the camera in the pitch null. Lovely. Let's add some colors to these guys. So let's control click on the two rotate and pitch null. Go basic, use color on. Make it, something like blue. Then select just the pitch null and make it something like pink. And press OK. Okay, so there it is the rig. Now the reason I put the pitch null here and the rotate null on top is because for a second let's get into our camera view here. Now right now if I pitch the null, if I use the pitch null and I move it up and then I rotate, it'll act as we expect it to work. But if I rotate the pitch null and then I use and then I pitch the rotate null, when you rotate this null back, you'll start seeing that everything goes on an angle, which is not what we want. You you don't want the movements of the camera to skew your horizon line. And if you do the rotation below the pitch, like example, let's pitch this null. Let's move it up. So we're pitching the rotate null. Like let's do it pretty drastic. And then if we rotate this null, you'll see that the rotation bar that we wanted, this green line, is now on an angle. Like, see if you look at the castle and everything gets, the horizon line goes diagonal. But if we do the pitch on the pitch null and we rotate it up, we can rotate this null as much as we want and the horizon is still flat. Let's undo all this. Okay, let's add the reader tool, we get the colors. And, oops, viewport here. And good, we have the colors. So yeah, that's why we want the pitch null to be inside the rotate null, inside the move null. Because otherwise we get a skewing, we get a horizon line tilt, which isn't what we're after. So let's start keyframing this guy. Let's get into the camera position. And let's keyframe all three of these on the first frame, keyframe button. Let's move to the frame 10. And let's get the move null, change the move tool, and move it over just a tad. And keyframe that. So now there we have a bit of a pan. And then the boulder flies out. And let's zoom out here to see when it hits the castle. So it hits the castle around here. So let's get the move null and let's move him here. And let's keyframe that because we can see when we want. And now let's get the rotate null. And copy this. You can copy this keyframe by control clicking to 10. So the rotation only starts at frame 10, not at frame 0. And now we go to the rotate tool and we rotate so we can see when it hits the castle and keyframe. So there we have it. But right now the boulder kind of goes out of view. So we fix that with a pitch null. This is our pitch null. Now on frame 10 we want to add a keyframe, and on the frame when we actually, on the frame when we actually hit the castle, which is around 53, I think. Yeah, 53. We want to add a keyframe because we want it to come back here. We just want to adjust it in the middle. So in the middle, about here, we see that the boulder is really out of the way of the camera. So we need to also adjust the rotate null. So let's rotate it here so it's more in the middle. Keyframe that. And let's rotate the pitch now, the red axis. So the boulder's in view. And keyframe. And now, there it is, we have a nice, smooth animation with arcs. That's the important thing also about using nulls to rotate. When you rotate a null, you automatically get nice arcs. Whereas when you keyframe, you have to keyframe in all the curves, otherwise the lines are too straight, and the camera move doesn't look as nice. Now let's say we animated this this camera move, and now we realize that we want a crane move at the end, and our rig doesn't really support that right now. So what we want to do is we want to build a outside rig. What we want is we want there to be a pivot around the center of the castle. Like we could keyframe the move null, we can move it here and move it up, but once again we don't get the arcs and the camera move won't look as smooth. So what we want to do is we want to add a null. Let's make a null. Let's move it over to the middle of the castle. And we want to put this camera into the null, and we want to rotate the null so the camera moves around it. However, if you notice, we just rotate it here. And it looks like it's working, so we can just keyframe this null. But if you move the slider, suddenly all the camera animation is in the wrong place. And that is because this camera move null is grabbing its coordinates. Like it's keyframed at certain coordinates in local space, and this null offsets the local space. This is now for this null only sees the null that is above it, and for that this is its world. So it used to have 0, 0 at the world center, which is here. But now its 0, 0 coordinates are all the way over here and rotated. So it uses these coordinates instead of the world coordinates. So in order to work around this, let's move this null out of our pivot null. Let's call this a pivot null. And now if we press the key, now our animation works again as it did before. So what we need to do is we need an offset null. Let's make another null and leave it at 0, 0, so all its coordinates 0, 0, and call this offset null. And place the move null in here, so this move is still seeing these coordinates, which are identical to the world coordinates because they are the world 0, 0. So as you see, when you drag through, the animation still works. And now we place this offset null into the pivot null. Once again, we check the animation still works. But now what we do is we get this pivot null. Let's actually let's change this back to 0 because we forgot to. Now we put the offset null in the pivot null. And now the pivot null, when we want to start rotating, for example, here at frame 53, we place a keyframe. And then we go all the way to say frame 100 when everything explodes. And we rotate the null around and we put a keyframe in. And now when we scroll through, we see that the animation works here. And then everything starts rotating here and it pivots around the center of the castle. You'll see that it's not really, it's pivoting around the center of the castle, but the camera is not really centered. So what we want to do is add this frame here. We want to get our move null, and we want to just move it like at the next frame, say 55. We want to just nudge it across so that its center line intersects with the center axis, and press keyframe. And then drag this guy out to like frame 75 or something. So this way, now when it hits the castle, now it's rotating around the center of it. So the center of the rotation is the center of the screen. As you can see, it's like kind of like clinging on and rotating around a pillar in the middle. And now all we want to really do is move it up. Now we could make another null somewhere in there to move it up, or we could use the move null. But if you use the move null to raise it, there might be a curve, which isn't really what we want. There might be like a curve where it transitions from moving horizontally to moving vertically. So instead, let's just use this offset null. Right now it's not being used for anything, and rotating it wouldn't be bad, but we can use this offset null to move stuff up and down without any, negative repercussions. So let's go to frame 53, where everything starts rotating. So 53. Let's keyframe its position, and then let's find it here. And on frame 100, let's keyframe its position like up here, and keyframe it. Oops, 99 to 100. So now we have our pivot, and we have our rising null. Nifty, right? The only thing we have left is we need to add the pitch. So let's see where our pitch is. We have a keyframe in 53, go over to 100, and let's just rotate the camera with the pitch null to look at the castle, and make a keyframe. Now as you can see, we have our crane move all together in a nice little, rig. And the beauty of this rig is you can change everything very simply without really destroying the rest of the animation. For example, say we want, if you want to make something, if here you want to change how high this thing flies, it's very easy to just go find the pitch null and just adjust it without ruining any of the other animations. If you want to move things around, you can also find the right null and move it without, without damaging the crane move. Because, for example, this crane move works inside this pivot null. So if we want the crane to work somewhere else, we can just move this pivot null, and it will be craning around a different location. Well, we have to keyframe it in that location too. For example, if we want the crane move to stop, like on frame 100, we want the crane move to stop, I don't know, over here. We can keyframe that, and now the crane move will start here, and then it'll just move out over there if you have another castle, another tower. That's really the cool thing about using nulls is you can move these nulls just as long as you're moving the right nulls, and you can get a smooth rotation from one camera move to another, from one target to a different target, and you know, that's what it does. So here we go, we have our crane move, we have our bricks flying, everything is lovely. Now there's one last thing I still don't like about this animation, is that at the end it doesn't look very dramatic. Like you see the castle, but it's just a bit of a pivot. So what I want to do is I want to change the camera field of view. So let's go select our camera, go object, and let's change our focal length to, like, I don't know, 80 or maybe even 105. But let's undo this because we need to keyframe it first. So let's go to, where's our last frame? So 53. Let's keyframe our focal length 36 by control clicking on this little dot, and at frame 100 let's make this 105 and click and keyframe. As you'll notice, you can't really see much of the castle now, so let's adjust this. Let's get our offset null and frame 100. Let's move it way higher and keyframe this, and get our pitch null, and let's rotate it down. Keyframe. Okay, so clearly not enough yet, so let's keep on dragging our offset null higher up, and keyframe, and pitch null, and rotate it down. Keyframe. Okay, I think this 105 is too much. Let's drag this here so it's aligned at frame 100. Let's make it maybe like 75 or even just 60 or 50. Yeah, 50 is good. And control click. So now we'll get this nice little effect. So we'll feel that the camera is still pulling out really far, but we still keep, you know, our frame tight. Because if, for example, at 100, if we still had the focal length of 36, we'd be able to see a lot more, which we don't really want to see all this because it kind of ruins the illusion. So we want to keep it at 50. So there you have it. You have a crane move with a focal range change as well. So you can feel like you're getting further, and you can see less, but it's also going up. Hey guys, this is Alexei, and we have now finished the animation part of this tutorial. So we can play it back here and we see everything happening. What we need to do now is just set up the final rendering, you know, the lighting, and we're going to make some clouds to stick in the sky so we have some more reference of where this thing is moving. So right now the render isn't too bad. We have the sky, we have the little trees here. It's pretty solid. There's some ambient occlusion to add some shading. I'd probably plug a bit more. Let's get out. Let's call this camera. I'd probably hit this light a bit stronger, because right now let's push it to like 112%. Just to add a bit of that, so you have some bit more highlights. Maybe put it to 150. There you go, just to give that more. There, that's much nicer. So give it a bit more contrast and a bit more oomph. Okay, now this boulder here, it still has a font tag on it, I think. Yeah, it does. So let's delete that. And now when we render this section, so it looks much more low poly and nice. So that's good. We have the trees in the background different color, which simulates like a depth effect. Actually, we might as well add. I wanted to add some mountains, so let's just add some discs here. Let's get a disc. Let's rotate it over. Maybe back here. Let's scale it up. Let's give it a green material, something like. Let's control click it and call this Hill 1. Let's just drag and drop it onto the material. Maybe make it a bit less saturated, a bit lighter in color. Let's go move it back here. Let's hold the Alt key and put it in a cloner object. Let's move the cloner. Let's give it some, no, not X, let's give it some, not Y, some Z direction. Yes, some negative Z direction. So negative 300. Nope. There we go. Let's get out of the camera. Let's go camera, default camera. Maybe 3 is enough. Let's just stick 4 there. Make them editable. Let's grab our disks. Actually, let's grab all of them. Make them editable. Scale them down a bit. Let's grab this disk. Let's scale it up. Let's move it back. The reason I add these layers and I move them around is because I want more parallax in my scene. So basically let's go back to my camera now. Let's also change the color here. So we got a hill 1 with our materials. Let's get a hill 2. And this one, let's make it a bit more yellow. Let's apply it to this one here and to this one there. And maybe pull out the saturation on this a bit lighter. And now when we go back to our camera, when we move through our scene, it's important to see that, like, as the camera moves, the background should be in parallax, like as in the front should move faster than the foreground. The foreground and the background should move at different rates. And that's where these kind of hills come in. So yeah, there we go. Now the clouds. The clouds are going to be done with meterballs. It's nothing particularly complicated. We just get a sphere. Let's move it up here. Okay. Meterballs, turn off render perfect. I'll show you why in a second. Actually, let's keep it on for now. Let's control click and drag these, or just copy them over. So we have, by the way, I switched from this view to this view with a middle mouse click, or you can click on this button here to select which view you're in. So let's control click and drag this here, and maybe one more just here and scale it down. Now let's make a meterball object, and let's throw all of these spheres inside here. As you can see, it looks a bit like a cloud, but I want to reduce the hull value, or increase the hull value in this case, yep, to like 242%. Problem is, when we press edit on these, this thing explodes. That's because right now they're not using our hexahedron shape. These spheres are currently using the standard one. So if you have them on standard and you press C, oh, it also explodes. Okay, then it's nothing to do with that. It's just because when you make them editable, it explodes. Once you do that, if you decide you want to edit these spheres, just crank up the hull value again until you get what you want. I don't know, I'm going to keep them I'm going to keep them like this for now. They seem to do what I want them to do. Let's get this one, let's clone it. Let's pull this sphere out a bit more. There you go, we have a nice little cloud. And let's make a white material, let's call it cloud, and apply it to the meterball. And hit render. It's okay, but what I'm going to do firstly is let's delete the font tag. So we have some nice little cubes. Let's reduce the resolution. Let's play with the editor subdivision here. Remember to try and keep these on the same thing. You know what? Let's control click this font tag. Let's put it back on. For now, let's keep the font tag on this cloud. That's fine. So it's subdivision to like 10, so we can see how it's going to look in the final render. Now, for this material, I'm going to add in the color. Actually, let's go luminance. And let's add some Fresnel. So, Fresnel. and drag this thing down. Let's double click on this material so we can see a bigger window. Now luminance, and drag this Fresnel down as well. What this will add is this bit of lightness in the shadows, so it'll look like the cloud is kind of transparent. See, you get this little glow around here, so it looks like there's light passing through. We can make this a bit bluish as well, so it's more like a sky. Now it has a bit of a blue glow kind of thing there. And let's maybe crank the color just down, just to like 79, see how that works. Maybe 90. 90 is good. By the way, if you're wondering how I'm doing that render region thing, here it's render region. I just have it mapped to a shortcut. So I click the shortcut and then I drag. And I can render a specific area. Very handy. Okay, so we got one cloud. Let's call this cloud 1. And then as we fly over, let's go to our 4-view mode and let's drag this cloud across and place it over here. And then let's turn it off and go to our move tool. And with nothing selected, you can just click and drag on objects and you can reorganize them to look how you want. Same thing with the scale tool. You can now click and drag and you can scale some of these guys down. And you can move them around. And then you can just turn it back on and you have your little cloud. And once again, make sure they're on different portions to get more of a parallax effect. So as you move around, some clouds move faster, some slower. And there you have it. And so when we hit render, we have a nice little scene with nice little clouds, a nice little boulder flying through. And it hits it. And maybe some more fill light. I think just this. Where's the castle material? Scroll down to it. Oh, we didn't apply a castle. There you go. So let's apply this rock material. Actually, let's make a new castle material. Castle. And apply it. And let's make it just, oops, keep it white. And it's no specular, remember, so now when we render, the castle should look a bit nicer. There we go, much nicer. So there you have it. This is our animation with our crane up to show the damage, and our little trees and little catapult launching stuff. I think it turned out really nice. Okay, one more thing I'm going to go over is just how to render it. Let's go to our render settings, which are over here. And try to keep your render settings in 16:9. So if you go here and you go film video, pick something like HDV 1080-25, or just plug it in yourself. You know, turn off this lock ratio, plug in 1920 by 1080, and you will have a 16:9 ratio. And then if you want to make it smaller, just tick this button and you can go to 1024 or any size you want. Frame rate, I keep it at 25 because I think there's no point in rendering 30 frames in most situations unless you're doing stuff for a country where the TV's broadcast at 30 frames a second. And yeah, so then you just set your animation to all frames or wherever it finishes. Let's see where our animation finishes. There you go. Animation seems to finish at 100. So I'll just set it. I'll just finish this thing. Let's go to 100. Make a whole animation here. 100 frames. It's good. Save. Save as TIFFs or PNGs. I'd prefer to render PNGs. Give yourself a file path. Make sure your ambient occlusion is on. For me, it was on. Yeah, and that's pretty much it. Let's see what the result looks like. And here's the final rendered animation. As you can see, it flies over, it explodes, we crane up, everything's lovely. Feel free to post your animations down below. You know, I'd like to see what you come up with. Ask any questions. You know, I'll happily answer them as they come up. I would honestly really like one of these towers to topple over, but unfortunately in this simulation it didn't. Maybe you can always artificially topple it over, or you can maybe launch a brick at it, but for the most part I'm happy with this result.